Why don't they do it? How long have we been living here? I don't remember it ever being done.
The Izobilninskoye Reservoir is 20% full.
This is the Izobilnoye Dam. Once the lifeblood of Crimea, this 70-meter deep dam is now dying. The taps have run dry, the reservoirs have evaporated. From Alushta to Simferopol, millions of people wait for water tankers with empty containers in their hands. People are angry and helpless, trying to survive with transported water. Families keeping watch for the muddy water that flows for only 4 hours a day. Children who cannot wash, fear of epidemics. Now 2.5 million people have become refugees in their own homes, hostages on their own land because of the Kremlin's ambitions. When Putin took control of Crimea, he sent the world a single message.
А также ратифицировать подготовленный для подписания договор о вхождении Республики Крым и города Севастополь в Российскую Федерацию.
This was not just an annexation of land, it was a promise of empire. Years of propaganda, bridges costing billions of dollars, massive military bases, and the glittering showcase of the Russian world. But now, 77 settlements in Crimea are cut off from modern life. The irony is horrific. This peninsula, surrounded by sea on all sides, is dying of thirst. The Russian Occupation Administration officially admitted that by mid-2025, the peninsula will have only 90 days of water left. And the wave of anger is growing, and Putin is completely losing control in Crimea. Crimea's demise today actually stems from a single day. That fateful moment when the Russian army, in a panic to halt its advance into Ukraine, blew up the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant. Moscow believed it had gained a tactical advantage that day, bogging down Ukrainian tanks in the mud. However, when that explosion brought the laws of physics and hydraulic engineering into play, it became clear that Russia had not shot itself in the foot, but directly in the temple. The problem is not just the lack of water, the problem is hydraulic pressure. The North Crimean Canal is not a simple ditch. One of the most complex marvels of Soviet engineering, this system was designed to maintain water from the Dnieper River at a specific level and pressure. When the dam collapsed, the water level fell below the critical threshold. This means that the massive pumping stations at the canal's entrance can no longer suck up the water, i.e., the system has physically failed. Russia pulled the plug on its own garrison's life support unit to stop the Ukrainian army. Today, satellite data brutally exposes the Kremlin's lie that everything is under control. Look at the Izobilnoye Reservoir, the main source of life for Alushta and the surrounding villages. This massive body of water, once 70 meters deep, is now nothing more than a muddy pool of water turned into a swamp. Sergei Aksyonov, the Russian governor appointed by the Kremlin, and his team are trying to market the situation as seasonal drought. However, the data screams that this is not a climate issue, but a management disaster. As of October 2025, a total of 77 settlements across Crimea have switched to the water transport system because their tap water supply has been completely cut off. Feel the weight of that term. In the 21st century, on the European continent, thousands of people are waiting for tankers to arrive. This is not the infrastructure of a modern state. This is the helplessness of a medieval castle under siege. And the crisis is not limited to rural areas. The new regime imposed in the city of Alusht sums up the situation. Morning 6 to 10 and evening 6 to 10. Only twice a day, for a total of 8 hours, is there water. The rest of the time, the city turns into a ghost town where hygiene and life come to a standstill. The local population is forced to plan even the most basic needs, such as bathing or washing clothes, with military discipline. The Occupation Administration sold the public science fiction scenarios for years, such as, "We will bring water through tunnels under the sea," and "We will seed the clouds with planes to make it rain." They even claimed they would extract fresh water from under the Sea of Azov. All of these were expensive lies invented to buy time. At this point, the only solution left for Russia is excessive drilling. That is, savagely extracting groundwater. However, this is the final nail in the coffin of the peninsula. For every liter of fresh water extracted from underground, salt water seeps in from the sea to fill the void. Crimea's underground is rotting just like its surface. So why would a tap drying up in Crimea change the fate of the war on the Ukrainian front? The answer to this question lies in the cruelest rule of modern warfare: logistics. An army doesn't just fight with gunpowder, it lives on water. The collapse of the network system in Crimea has saddled the Russian army with a massive, cumbersome, and unmanageable logistical burden. Every water tanker you see on Crimean roads right now is actually a military truck that cannot carry ammunition, fuel, or medical supplies to the front. With the Kerch Bridge already constantly closing and opening under the threat of Ukrainian drones and missiles, the Russian army is now forced to spend its limited logistical capacity on transporting water. This is a case of self-strangulation. Moscow has had to divert hundreds of trucks, tons of fuel, and thousands of personnel from the front line to water logistics to transport water to 77 settlements. Every liter of water entering Crimea is a liter of fuel that cannot go into a Russian soldier's tank at the front. This logistical crisis is tearing apart not only the army, but also the home front. Crimea's once proud agricultural sector has been crushed, literally, by drought and salinization. The peninsula, once Russia's fruit garden, has now become a massive consumption monster dependent on external supplies. Local production has ceased. Cattle herds are being sent to slaughter because there is no water to irrigate and no feed to eat. Dairy farms are trying to produce with milk powder, i.e. fake food, because they cannot find fresh milk. Food and feed must be transported to Crimea from Russia and Belarus. This doubles the pressure on the already congested Kerch Bridge and ferry routes. According to Ukrainian intelligence reports, rising feed prices and lack of water have bankrupted farmers. Crimea can no longer feed itself. Billions of rubles are being poured out of the Russian budget every day to feed this black hole. And this famine is inevitably triggering a class war. The Russian occupation administration is using its limited water supply as a strategic weapon. So, who has access to water? Russian military bases, the villas of FSB elites, and luxury hotels kept open to maintain Moscow's "everything is fine" image. So, who has no water? Crimean Tatars, Ukrainians, and ordinary villagers. This situation is creating a silent but deep atmosphere of mutiny on the peninsula. The protests reported in July 2025 signaled that the people were beginning to overcome their fear barrier. People are taking to the streets not for political demands, but to survive. And the Kremlin's response comes with a Stalinist reflex: information blockade. With new legal regulations prepared in September 2025, sharing information about the water shortage on social media is being attempted to be criminalized as discrediting the Russian army or spreading panic. But banning the truth doesn't fill the dams. When people are thirsty, they can't eat or drink propaganda posters. The "who is to blame" dispute that began between Simferopol's Kremlin-appointed leader Sergei Aksyonov and Moscow shows that the regime is crumbling. Aksyonov blames the army's excessive consumption, while Moscow accuses the local administration of incompetence. This internal conflict proves that the crisis has entered an unmanageable phase of chaos. The dam burst is not the only cause of the crisis. The real culprit is the structural decay of the Russian occupation administration. Moscow has been pouring billions of rubles in subsidies into the peninsula for years to keep Crimea afloat. On paper, this money was supposed to be used to lay new pipelines and renovate pumping stations. However, the reality on the ground is a complete corruption scandal. According to the Crimean Parliament's own data, the current water loss rate in the network has reached 70%. This means that for every 10 litres of water pumped into the system, 7 litres seep into the ground before reaching the tap, literally evaporating. Russia cannot transport the water because the pipes that carry it are decayed. So where did the repair money go? The answer to this question lies in the collapse of Crimea's agricultural sector. According to expert Boris Babin's analysis, Crimea's agricultural land and water resources are managed by a complex network of bribery and corruption established by the Russian bureaucracy. For a farmer to access water, it's not enough to simply turn on the tap. They also have to pay tribute to the local feudal lords. The system is built not on using water efficiently, but on profiting from the crisis. While farmers go bankrupt, local officials are siphoning off emergency funds from Moscow. This situation has turned Crimea into an economically unsustainable black hole. Russia is losing not only water, but also money in this hole. And now, as drought knocks on the door, they are painfully learning that the only thing money can't buy is time. To view this as merely today's logistical problem is to underestimate the magnitude of the impending disaster. The picture we are facing is the reality that Crimea has been destroyed as a geography. The brutal methods Russia is using to save the day, extending the 90-day period to 120 days, are destroying the peninsula's future forever. Soil salinization, scientifically known as salinization, is an irreversible process. Thousands of illegal wells drilled by Russia have lowered the underground water pressure, allowing seawater to invade freshwater aquifers. Soil irrigated with salt water becomes concrete-like, and not even grass can grow on it. According to experts, once soil reaches this level of salinization, rehabilitation takes at least 50 years. So even if Russia maintains military control over Crimea, it will actually be occupying a dead piece of land. This is the most insidious and ruthless version of the scorched earth tactic, turning against the occupier itself. Ecological collapse inevitably brings demographic collapse in its wake. Hundreds of thousands of Russian citizens, including retired soldiers, FSB officers, and white-collar workers who fled Moscow, whom Putin has settled in Crimea since 2014 as part of his population engineering project, are now packing their bags. Without water, there is no life. Without water, real estate value is zero. Russia's project to Russify Crimea has failed, along with the drought. While Crimean Tatars and Ukrainians try to hold on to their ancestral land, Moscow's newcomers will be the first to flee. Crimea was not a homeland for Russia, but merely a holiday resort to be abandoned when the water ran out. However, the real nightmare scenario has not yet made the headlines: the biological time bomb. A drop in water pressure does not just mean that the taps stop running. It means the sewage systems will not work. Without water pressure to push the wastewater away, the sewage networks will clog and start to leak. Sewage mixing with clean water lines opens the door to epidemics of cholera, typhoid, dysentery, and hepatitis in the trenches of Crimea and Donbass. The situation in Donbass is no different from Crimea. People in Donetsk and Mariupol are dependent on water that comes once a week. The cities that Russia claims to have liberated are turning into breeding grounds for medieval plague epidemics. Russian soldiers, who froze to death in winter and were hit by drones in summer, are now dying in the trenches from microbes caught from dirty water. The nature of the war is evolving from a kinetic to a biological disaster. This crisis also marks the end of Russia's global ambitions. Imagine a superpower that cannot provide water to the lands it occupies. Imagine a nuclear power that cannot manage the sewage of the cities it has captured. This drought belt, stretching from Donbass to Crimea, is proof of the complete collapse of the Russian model of governance. Russia is not a power that builds, but only consumes and destroys. And now, what it is consuming is its own army's chance of survival. That ominous darkness, deprivation, and helplessness, believed until then to be only the fate of Ukrainian cities, now covered Crimea, Russia's annexed jewel, the crown of the empire, like a shroud. And the Kremlin's greatest promise to the Russian people, stability and security, was wiped out at that moment, along with the rusty, hollow sound coming from a dried-up water pipe. The water crisis in Crimea is not a simple infrastructure problem or a temporary drought. It is the physical and geographical limit of Russian imperialism. An empire does not end when it loses its armies, it ends when it loses its geography. And in Crimea, the geography is rejecting the occupier. The land itself is throwing off the Russian boots. In 90 days, it will not be water flowing from the taps in Alushta, Simferopol, and Sevastopol, but the strategic bankruptcy of the Kremlin. And this flow will engrave this terrible message into Russia's collective memory. There is no safe place. Putin's war did not stay on the front lines. It came to your kitchen, your bathroom, your child's water glass. Crimea was supposed to be a magnificent victory monument for Putin. Now, it is turning into a vast graveyard covered in salt. its last breath with lips cracked from thirst. So, what are your thoughts on this matter? Please share your thoughts in the comments. To stay updated on new videos, please subscribe to our channel and don't forget to turn on notifications. Thank you for choosing us.